Good morning. Welcome to the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors meeting for October 9th, 2018. Madam Clerk.
Item 1 on the closed session agenda, pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D1, conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation, County of Calaveras v. Pacific Gas and Electric Company et al., San Francisco County Superior Court Case Number CGC 18564465.
Are there any public comments on this item? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Item 2, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, 2 cases pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D2.
Are there any public comments on this item? Seeing none, we'll go to closed session. All right, good morning. Welcome to the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors meeting for October 9th, 2018. Shall we all rise if you can for the pledge? Supervisor Platt, can you please lead us?
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, can you please read out the memo from closed session?
Item 1, pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D1, conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation, County of Calaveras versus Pacific Gas and Electric Company et al., San Francisco County Superior Court Case Number CGC 18564465. There was no reportable action taken. Item 2, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, 2 cases pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D2. There was no reportable action taken.
Thank you. Moving on to announcements. Madam Clerk.
Announcements. This is a time for board members and county staff to provide updates of upcoming county events that may be of interest to the public.
And just a reminder that the board will recess for lunch at 12 p.m. until 2 p.m. for the pie social. It'll be outside out here, I guess, in the Glade area that we just recently put together Glade area. So, announcements. Any board members have an announcement?
I do, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Oliveira.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, just to announce that we are going to be having a community meeting in Arnold. It's going to be held this Saturday at 9 o'clock at the Blue Lake Springs Amphitheater for the Homeowners Association regarding the PG&E program that's being currently in place, removing the debris and trees from the transmission lines of PG&E. The county's not involved in this particular project. It is totally by PG&E, but due to numerous inquiries, emails, telephone calls, there is some confusion on how that program is run and administered and what selection of trees. PG&E will be present at that meeting along with their contractors to answer the questions that have been brought forth by the public. Once again, this is not any involvement with the county. It's an informational meeting for the public that's been requested.
Supervisor Mills, your light's on.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Burns Ferry Bridge has been hit again. And the result is some pretty serious damage to the guardrails on both the Calaveras and the Tuolumne side now. So just be aware that there are cones out, but it's a very tight area and you could get caught. So please just be aware of it. Secondly, the Wild West Fest is going to be happening in Angels Camp a week after next. And for those that know, it's a big event for them down there. So if you can please attend, do so and enjoy a little bit of the Old West days. It's coming up. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any other board announcements? If not, is there staff announcements?
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. Judy Hawkins, Human Resource and Risk Director. And this announcement is more for the employees of the county. And I just want to remind everybody of the employee health fair that we are having on Thursday, and to also invite the board. My staff has worked very hard in pulling this health fair together. It's our first big health fair. And the departments that are also contributing, and we have animal services that will be expanding the WAG and Walk program to the employees. We have human services that will be talking about foster families. Our library services are going to be talking about healthy minds, and then we'll also have the virtual reality machine set up in the room over here so our employees can see what is being offered at our library. Also, we'll have our workers' comp, our safety program, we'll have a booth set up. Public health will be also contributing, our employee spirit committee, voter registration, so we'll have that opportunity. And then we may also have a few latecomers that are also contributing to the health fair, besides our benefit program providers. This is a great opportunity for employees to talk one-on-one with the benefit providers, and then also find what is the best option for their benefit program. It's from 10 to 2. We will have lunch from 12 to 2. Crazy Eddie's is providing sandwiches, and so we're very excited to have this for the employees. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other staff announcements? Seeing none, we'll move on. Recognitions and acknowledgments. Madam Clerk.
Item 3 is from District 5 to proclaim the week of October 14th through 20th, 2018 as Freedom from Workplace Bullies Week in Calaveras County.
Supervisor Clapp.
Thank you. A proclamation recognizing October 14th through 20th, 2018 as Freedom from Workplace Bullies Week in Calaveras County. Whereas the County of Calaveras has an interest in promoting the social and economic well-being of its citizens, employees, and employers, and whereas that well-being depends upon the existence of a healthy and productive employees working in a safe, abuse-free work environment, and whereas research has documented the stress-related health consequences for individuals caused by exposure to abusive work environment, and whereas abuse work environments are costly for employers, with consequences including reduced productivity, absentees, turnovers, and injuries. And whereas protection from abusive work environment should apply to every worker and not be limited to legal protected classes, status basis only on race, color, gender, national origin, age, or disabilities. Public comment?
So we have any board comments on this? No board comments? We'll open up for public comments. Any public comments on this?
I was just going to say that. Marty Crane, District 5. I'd like to pose a couple questions and then a couple of just comments. I remember last year was the first year, I believe, that we had a resolution on bullying in the workplace. So I'd like to ask first, how far does the workplace extend? Would that be any location where work on behalf of the county is being performed? How about residents working as volunteers on behalf of the county? Do acts of bullying extend to gossip, an insidious and destructive activity? It destroys morale individually and collectively, and it undermines a team's ability to be effective and productive. Gossip fuels whisper campaigns prevalent in typical workplace environments and political campaigns. All political candidates for elected office are requested to sign a statement that they will not participate in whisper campaigns. It is optional, that signature. I don't know which of our electeds running for re-election or those running for office actually signed it, but if we take the time to listen, we know whisper campaigns are alive and well, right here in Calaveras. I would suggest that candidates who do not address this issue with their supporters are to some extent guilty of endorsing whisper campaigns as well. All this undermines and marginalizes the voices and opinions of others, many of whom represent and advocate for our most fragile residents. Respect for others requires one to be willing to act and speak up against all forms of bullying. We cannot rise above what we refuse to acknowledge. Thank you.
Good morning, Beth Whitkey, District 5. I find it ironic that you, Supervisor Clapp, read that proclamation, as there are incidents of you bullying on this campus. It's much like when you read the elder abuse proclamation with your pending elder abuse charges. I'd like to call on you to resign your place on this board because of your inappropriate behavior in public. And I think it's really crucial that people look into your past with the amount of domestic violence that you've been court-ordered to seek anger management over. I think that it's ironic that you would be asked again to read that proclamation, and I think the rest of the board should put pressure on you and censure you for your inappropriate behavior. Thank you.
Good morning, Vicki Reinke, Calaveras County. I wasn't planning on really getting up because we know what bullying is, and it's a sad thing. And I guess when we were growing up, we were kind of taught things like sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never harm me, and you learned how to get through it. But it seems to just be getting nastier and nastier by some people. So I do agree with what was said about being a good campaign, not, I don't know what a whisper campaign is exactly, but whatever that is, because I know for a fact that Mr. Clapp was asked to leave, Supervisor Clapp was asked to leave Marvell, and because there were complaints. Well, I personally sat in Supervisor Clapp's booth a couple weekends, and we were respectful. We didn't do anything. We didn't even leave the booth to go give a flyer to somebody. We just sat and let people come to us. So on the weekend that he was asked to leave that parking lot, I wasn't there, but I can be 100% sure that there was nobody harassing anybody. So I did call the sheriff's office because I know they were the ones who came, and I asked, was there a report? Do we know who was making these accusations? Because was there any investigation?
Okay, but we need to deal with bullying.
Okay, but that's
Okay.
bullying.
Okay.
And so I'm just
We need
repeating
to tie it
because,
together. Oh, okay,
okay,
I'll tie it
here's the bullying part. We get people coming up here and saying how we should be so kind. Well, listen to what you're saying and do what you say. Thank you.
Susan Morse, I've become familiar, I know and have met and have spent some time with Clyde working on different programs with him, with Supervisor Clapp, and I can say that the statements that are being made are totally unfair and based on information that's gossip. There's no truth to it. They have come to me and said, shown me things that I have found to be false. I do check into the truth. And Supervisor Clapp has never once in my presence, or have I heard anyone else, even people, because I've been at his booth too, and I've been with him at different activities, and no one, I have never seen him one time bully, be rude. The man is kind. He's a kind human being. And for those of you up here that know who he is, we shouldn't stand for people coming up and making accusations that are not true. They make things that they found in court records. Well, if you go look at those court records, they're false. It's not the whole story. People make allegations in court records, which you all know. That doesn't mean it's true. That means someone has made some allegations. I ask today that all of us become more civil and more acceptance of one another. Because I've been bullied by them. I've had people jump out of the car at me in Murphy's because I didn't agree with them, or I was taking away their livelihood. Is that not bullying? Scared my friends from the Bay Area out of their wits. They're still worried that my life is in jeopardy. I'm not worried. I'm just saying we all need to be kind to each other. And no, we should never bully anyone. That's a fact. But we shouldn't be accused of being bullied when it's not true. At least in my experience, I look for the facts and I look for the truth. Thank you.
It seems to me that the rules for different groups of people are different. If liberals want to be bullying, they get to do it, and nobody says a thing, because the other side is polite and tries to be polite. And I am getting really saddened by it. They can do anything they want. They can break the rules. They can go in here. If I go in there, I might be carrying a gun or doing something to somebody. But if somebody else who's liberal, who's a Democrat, who's a pot proponent does it, then that's okay. And the fact that I'm saying this makes me a little person, because I'm not liberal, I'm conservative. I care about how the money is spent in the government. I care about how I spend my money. I try to make it stretch as far as I can. And I believe the rules of the playing field are uneven to the point that there is no comparison. And that is in high school too. I remember being in high school. I remember the ostracization because I talked to certain people that other people felt that you shouldn't talk to. And so they didn't talk to me because guilty by association, right? Well, guess what? I'm an American citizen, and I'll talk to whoever I want, and I'll be polite to whoever I want. I will try not to call people on trivialities, but when we're continuously called on trivialities, it really gets tiresome.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, we'll bring it back. Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
I would like to bring it to the attention of the board and those listening that in July of 2016, the Human Resources Department, on behalf of the county, passed a new equity policy. And within the equity policy, it does include bullying. Even though it's not required by state law or federal law, we included it. And one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is some of the areas of bullying. There's verbal bullying, physical bullying, gesture bullying, and exclusions, and cyberbullying. And one of the fastest growing trends within bullying is the exclusions and cyberbullying. And the county we take a very strong position on it. And if we do have employees who feel that, employees or volunteers, who feel that they are victims of bullying, we strongly encourage that they go to their managers, their supervisors, their department heads, and report bullying. If they feel they're not being listened to, then they need to come to Human Resources, because we do take it very seriously. Thank you.
Al Sagala, Taxpayer Association. We oppose bullying, but I wonder, we're putting a week aside to recognize the harm of bullying. And I wonder, do we have any weeks left, to celebrate things? It seems like every time we have a meeting, we're putting a week aside for this purpose or that purpose. On bullying, do we have any evidence that we have a problem with bullying among county employees? This is about county employees. It's not about bullying in the general population, though that shouldn't occur either. But I just, if there's no problem in the county with bullying, why do you want to pass this thing? This week could perhaps be set aside for something that could be more important and more germane to county government. Thank you.
Any other public comments? If not, we'll bring it back to the board. Looking for a motion.
So moved. Sorry, so moved.
A motion by Supervisor Mills.
I'll second it.
A second by Supervisor Clapp. Any other board comments? Not, I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0.
Now therefore, be it proclaimed that the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors proclaims October 14th through 20th, 2018 as Freedom from Workplace Bullies Week in Calaveras County, recognizing the California Health Workplace Advocates and the Workplace Bullying Institute, which raises awareness of the impacts and solution of the workplace bullying in the United States and encourage all citizens to recognize this special observance.
Passed and adopted.
Passed and adopted by the Board of Supervisors, Calaveras County, State of California, this 19th day of October 2018.
All right, do we have anybody to accept? Yeah, we voted. 5-0. Do we have anybody to accept this proclamation? Judy, you want to come forward as HR Director? Supervisor Clapp, you want to go around and hand it to her?
Okay. well.
All right. Moving on to public comment.
Public comment. Any item of interest to the public that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board and is not posted on the consent or regular agendas may be addressed during the public comment period. California law prohibits the board from taking action on any matter which is not posted on the agenda unless it is determined to be an emergency by the Board of Supervisors. If public comment is completed before the 30-minute allotted time period, the board may immediately move to the next order of business. If public comment is not completed during the allotted time period, it will be continued as the last item of business in order to provide an opportunity for the remainder of comments to be heard.
Now remind people that are sitting out in the foyer out there, please come forward if you are going to speak publicly and not wait until you see nobody else is up here and then come in. We need to keep it moving forward, so thank you. Public comment period.
Good morning again, Marty Crane. I just wanted to read an email that I forwarded to Supervisor Oliveira a while back, and I let him know this morning that I was going through an email that I was going to read this. So I'll just read it verbatim. Good morning, Michael. I am sorry for this long note, but I believe it may be time sensitive, so thanks in advance for reading on. County Council said she reached out to her colleagues and found that most, I don't know, do not allow the public to raise a point of order. We know that how you ask a question and whether or not you ask follow-up questions has a direct bearing on the answers you get. So, yesterday, this was a week or so ago, I visited Shasta, Tehama, Colusa, Glenn, Yuba, and Sacramento counties and spoke with a clerk to the board or their staff in each county. I received their adopted rules, procedures, code of conduct, if they had such documents, and emails from 2 of the counties. I wanted to see if they even addressed the option of the public raising a point of order. None of them do. It has never come up. In fact, the idea was foreign to their experience. I asked specifically if a member of the public raised a point of order, would they be acknowledged and their point heard? Because they said, because we're all on the same team and we want to get it right. The general consensus for those I had had a face-to-face conversation with, which was 4 out of the 6, was, of course, we would want to know if we're about to make a mistake. Now, here in Calaveras, I believe some members of the public took my, quote, silent poison point of order to be an attack on their supervisor and or their desire for a ban. They immediately began misusing the point of order to stop the speaker, beginning with me. From there, others became frustrated and did the same thing, mostly, I believe, to call attention to how the point of order was being misused. Democracy is messy. You as board chair, and now Chair Tofanelli, have done your level best to maintain a professional, respectful environment. And now I've noticed that the public is no longer abusing the process. Sounds like we were successful in correcting the misconceptions surrounding the point of order process, or maybe the potential loss of that process got their attention. So writing the public out of the process is, in my view, unnecessary, reactive, and unduly restrictive. That being said, some form of description in the rules would go a long way towards educating the public and new board members, staff, etc. as to the process. You will recall that for over 20 minutes, no board member, staff, or county council stepped up to raise the silent poison point of order. I think everyone was in shock and disbelief. It took the public, an integral member of the team, to bring it to light. A point of order is non-accusatory, non-aggressive. And
Thank you.
may I finish the last
Thank
sentence?
you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hopefully you'll
It would
finish
be
that
unfair.
for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Will Moore from Valley Springs, Rancho Calaveras, and I'm bringing up an issue from the September 16th meeting, and it's item 14 on the regular agenda. I believe that item was tabled, and I'm raising it today because I may not be here when it comes up again. But this item is to adopt a resolution to summarily vacate a future street off Marty Drive in Blue Lake Springs. Okay, as I understand it, this is a giveaway of public property on the basis of 2 properties. There are 3 properties involved in this deal, and 2 of these scheming neighbors are trying to get a gimme, some kind of a free gift of public land, cutting off access to a 3rd property on the basis of their statement that the 3rd property doesn't need the access. It already has other access. But these 2 scheming neighbors, they don't need it either. They just want a gimme. I object to this on a couple of grounds. One is this whole idea of privatization of public property. I mean, that's taking my share of the public property and hanging it over to private interests for no good reason. I mean, there's no water treatment plant going in there or railroad right away or anything. It's just a gimme for a couple of guys. Secondly, the idea of removing access of the 3rd property without letting that owner know, without that owner being in on this deal, in other words, doing it behind his back or her back, I mean, that street could be access to an apartment complex or something of that nature in the future if and when there ever gets sewers in that area. So I object to this thing on the grounds that working this deal between these 2 neighbors without including the other person who's being cut off is unethical and possibly illegal. Thank you. I'm Will Moore.
Mr. Chair, Could you inquire the date of that meeting of the last person that spoke, so I can do some research?
December 16th.
December 16th?
Oh, September 18th.
September.
September 18th.
September 18th? Thank you.
Okay, Beth Whitkey, District 5. So I'm finishing Marty's comment. A point of order is non-accusatory, non-aggressive, and certainly not directed at any one person. We're all on the same team, and a chair should welcome a valid point of order regardless of who raises it. I must say that I raised another point of order that was determined to not be a valid point of order. So I too am guilty of not getting it right. My hope is that you will consider bringing this agenda item back for reconsideration. Thank you for reading this long text. I am unable to attend this morning, and I'm not sure if there is time constraints on reconsideration. Okay, so that was Marty's. I am concerned about the rules back here, that they are incomplete, and some of the text is written differently than in the actual rules, so I think we need to address that. To my point earlier, I'm not gossiping or making things up when I talk about what's in the public record. There are judgments against my supervisor that are, in fact, the facts have been found to be valid, that he has been convicted and served time for domestic violence. So I don't really like people coming up here saying, well, that's not the man I know, and calling me basically a liar when it's in the public record. So I am not at all a proponent for bullying, but I do think that facts are facts and opinions are opinions, and we should not confuse the two. Let's see. I'm deeply concerned about the direction of the county. I feel strongly that the cannabis registrants need to get their money back. I feel like it's not, like the budget was somewhat of a dishonest document. We do have a large deficit, and I'm just really opposed to the direction of this county. Thank you.
Good morning again. Al Sakala, Taxpayer Association. I've got several items. One is on CalPERS. You're probably aware that the direction of CalPERS heads towards real difficulty for local government, and including possibility of bankruptcy. One of the solutions to that was recommended by the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association, and that is negotiating for specified contributions instead of specified benefits. This should be studied, and we would recommend that you set the time aside, look into this, and then hopefully we'll convince the employees that it would be a better way to go, because then they'll have a healthy future. Next item is we see litigation in our agendas, and we don't know what's really happening, but there's a tremendous amount of it. I think it would be appropriate for county council or the CAO to add this up, to come up with a number of different lawsuits. How many lawsuits are they? And what is the total amount that the taxpayer could be liable for? I mean, this is a reasonable request, and we hope that you'll be able to put a report together for the public as to what the situation is in Calaveras County of all these lawsuits. The last item is we support yes on Proposition 6. We look at it very similarly to Prop 13. Prop 13 protect the property owners for runaway property taxation. In this case, we have almost runaway taxation of gas. The money that's taxed for gasoline should go for road repairs, not for railroads, not for other projects, and not to balance the state budget. The recent tax increase was a bad law, and it needs to be repealed. And then we need to encourage our state representatives to deal with this matter in a more honest way. Thank you.
Neil McEwen, District 4. Dennis, 2 weeks ago you chose to vote against passing the budget you created without any explanation as to why. As a constituent of yours now, I demand you tell us how you can sit there and not take responsibility for the document you are wholly responsible for generating. It has your stains all over it because of the flawed policies you have chosen to implement during your tenure. This budget is yours and you refuse to own it. Instead of releasing 26 additional staff hired for a program you dismantled, you chose to keep them as a free perk to your developer friends, expecting the rest of the county's residents to bear the brunt of the additional load. Your priority budgeting is based on providing unfunded giveaways to Castle and Cook at your constituents' expense, which is a pure example of negligent mismanagement. Surely even you wouldn't consider taking away more money from the sheriff's office to fund code enforcement, would you? Under your leadership, the building department has failed to provide its new fee study with no consequence. Let's talk about untapped revenue and prioritizing accountability. We need total cost recovery from developers, not self-funded enterprises for HOA rule enforcement. We need smart, efficient, sustainable growth, not high-impact suburban sprawl to preserve our rural quality of life. Why should the remainder of the county be responsible for impacts created by developers in our district? Why are we not talking about development fees? These are such common practice in other municipalities that they're considered simply the price of doing business. Why is there no sewage treatment for Saddle Creek? Is it because you can subsidize your friend's development with repaving projects ahead of schedule so the impact of the sewage trucks won't be noticed? How about implementing real practical development fees for large developers so that they pay their own way for the county services they require? Increasing fees that would fund the sheriff's department, fire districts, public works, environmental health, planning, and yes, code enforcement, for the extra load they place on already stressed departments. Would this not be a more fair and equitable means to fund the county? Clearly, the roads still not fixed after the fire are of no concern to you because they aren't in our district. Your selfish, corrupt mismanagement is abhorrent. Explain yourself, Dennis, right or wrong. You owe us a lot more than double-talking political disinformation. And lastly, Clyde, we know you were at a funeral, but I want to thank you for recusing yourself from voting on the budget, as it would have been wholly inappropriate for you to do so, considering you were sleeping during Rebecca Callan's presentation.
Thank you.
2 hours and 54
Thank you,
minutes.
sir.
I don't know whether you guys watch the Triple Crown races, but George Soros owns a horse that is named Justify, and he won the Triple Crown this year. It kind of brings to mind the saying, the end justifies the means. In other words, if people think that what they are going to accomplish is going to be accomplished by doing anything that they can possibly do to win, then they will do it. As far as the point of order to disrupt the meeting and blur the presentation being made, which is perhaps against the opposing side, I think that that is one of those examples of the ends justifies the means. Thinking you're special because you can speak longer past the time, that's the ends justifies the means. Pot has been kept growing, and some people are still growing it. I asked the sheriff why, and he asked me, where are these grows? Who's growing? It is not my job to trespass to find out. That is the job of the law enforcement. Another question would be why so many pot busts don't have the just harvested pot plants on, or any of the growers, especially the party behind it. Again, it's the ends justifies the means. And people have different goals in this county, and we're going in opposite directions. And Abraham Lincoln said that if you're divided against yourself, you fall.
Good morning. Just a brief comment, well, 3 minutes is brief, period, on the adoption of the new rules of procedure. Just to remind you what I believe you already know, that when you adopted those rules, you did so in the face of a huge, overwhelming number of people in the public comment telling you clearly that they didn't want this, didn't support it. And again, remind you that that was during Constitution Week, when the public was encouraged to honor the values of the people who framed the Constitution. And I just find it comical that you were in such a hurry to do it that you adopted language that didn't yet exist, that was then passed down, but of course it was enforceable immediately, and then it was passed down by oral tradition or something for a couple weeks until the language actually came to exist. And you also told us that you were going to post the rules in those, which those are not the rules. Those are a few excerpted rules and some suggestions, like there's nothing in the rules that are posted up there that has cell phone etiquette, which is not in the rules. I looked. And also the part about the board chambers being a kindness zone, that's not in the rules. I looked. And sometimes I believe this board makes a mock of that yourselves, calling this a kindness zone when you do some ridiculously unkind things from where you're sitting. And also, thanks to Marty for addressing a point that I wanted to make about the lateral comparisons, comparing our rules to those of other counties. I wish Ms. Stedfeld was here. I'd like to talk to her about that, because I've done my own research into other counties' policies on public raising. Point of order too. And lastly, on points of order raised by the public, yeah, people abuse that sometimes. I've seen it lots of times on both sides of many issues. Abuse is the hallmark of liberty. And people abuse alcohol. We didn't outlaw it. People abuse cars. We don't outlaw it. People abuse all kinds of things. That's the price of trying to have a free society, is you have to accept that there's going to be abuse. You should not address that by taking away people's liberties to prevent abuse, in my opinion. And that's my comment for this morning. Thanks.
Other public comment?
Good morning, everyone. I wasn't going to speak at public comment, but I'm kind of at the point now where I just find humor in what's going on. It's the absurdity of the situation here. To hear people complaining about the sheriff not being able to get rid of all the growers out there, the illegal growers. We told you that would happen. I mean, we came in here and warned you. You're opening up the doors to illegal cartels. You're never going to catch the ringleaders. You're never going to shut them down. And instead, you shut down good players, people that want to play by the rules. And on bullying, I find it interesting. I just want to make it clear that when I show up here because I choose to.
And if I don't show up here, I show up here because I choose not to come. I'm not going to be bullied into not approaching Diane to ask her a simple question because someone's offended that I'm a grower, a liberal, and a Democrat. That's pretty un-American in my opinion. So I think there's a lot to be said about all these, the bullying and the context of what's going on in our county. I'm moving. You guys drove us out. You ran us out on a rail. We're moving soon, pulling our business out, taking our tax dollars, our jobs, somewhere else. And that despite the fact that I love this place. I want to stay here more than anything. I want to live here. Also a comment was made, I think I'll bring it up. I'm not sure what the context was about people feeling like they were mistreated in Arnold or Murphy's one day. There was a day that we had a massive meeting, hundreds, probably, I don't know, over 100 people having a meeting upstairs in the Mark Twain Ballroom. And on that particular day, a lot of the people who were for a band were there and they're having dinner and stuff. And I specifically remember standing in front of the Murphy's Hotel and inviting someone who commented today to come join us. And I meant it. Come on over. Come check it out. Hear what we're doing. Come learn. Oh, no, we don't want to do that. Fine. Now, I'm not saying someone didn't jump out of their car and was a jerk. I'm sure that's entirely possible. But my recollection is I remember actually sincerely inviting someone to come in and, come check it out. There's actually historical precedence from that in the Hindu Bhagavad Gita, where in what was going to be a big battle, one side invited the other side to come over and just check out what they had going on. Yeah, come on over, check it out. We're honorable warriors here. Anyway, I'm sorry we have to go. I wish it wasn't the case. So, best to you guys. We'll see what happens in November.
Other public comments?
Good morning. I'm sorry to hear that some of the people I do believe are probably good commercial pot growers are leaving. However, I would like to say that the last 3 years prior to this year were hell for me and my neighbors and my family. For 3 years, I thought that my place was the ugliest place on earth. I hated it. I wanted out of there, but I couldn't escape. And that was because the prior board allowed commercial pot regulation. And what happened was the good people, such as the man that was here earlier, announced this to the world that we're the greatest place on earth to grow. So unfortunately, they attracted the cartels and the gangs and the straw men into our neighborhoods, right next door to families with children, and right next door to retired people like myself. And it was so horrific and so unsafe that even my own family would not come to my ranch. And for 3 years, they didn't. This is the first year they have come back. And why? Because 3 supervisors enacted a ban on commercial marijuana growing. And that would be Supervisor Clyde Clapp, Supervisor Dennis Mills, and Supervisor Gary Toffanelli. So I want to say to everybody out there watching this, don't be fooled. These character assassinations going on against Supervisor Dennis Mills and Supervisor Clyde Clapp is for one reason and one reason only, because they are angry that commercial marijuana got banned. Thank you.
Other public comments? Seeing none, I'll close public comments. We'll move on to consent agenda. Madam Clerk.
Consent agenda items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested party may request removal of an item from the consent agenda for later discussion.
Does any board member wish to pull an item off the consent agenda?
Number 8. 9 and 12.
Any other board members? Seeing none. Any staff member? No? Any member of the public?
Who said that?
More.
Will Moore. All right. So we have items 4, 6, 7, 10, 11, 13, and 14. I'm looking for a motion to
I'll make the motion to move the balance.
I have a motion by Supervisor Clapp. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Supervisor Mills. Any other discussion? If not, open for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Before we go into the next item, we'll take a 5-minute break. All right, we're back from break. Item from the consent agenda, item number 5. Madam Clerk.
Item 5 is from the assessor to adopt a resolution authorizing the assessor to sign the application for Open Space Subvention, Open Space Subvention Act survey from the state of California under the Open Space Subvention Act for 2018-19 and subsequent years.
Mr. Moore, you pulled this item. You have a question on it?
I'm Will Moore from Rancho Calaveras. Anyhow, I believe this is an application for a subdivision. I don't know quite what open space subdivision means. Is that a regular urban sprawl? Is that what we're talking about?
Subvention, not subdivision.
Am I? Open space subvention. Excuse
Subvention,
me.
correct.
I'm
So
sorry.
you're okay? All right. Other public comments on this?
Yeah. Can somebody explain what this is?
We have the assessor here in the room that can do that. Let's have other public comment. If there's any other public comments, so we answer them all at once. Seeing none, Leslie, would you like to come forward and explain your item?
Mr. Chair, honorable members of the board, good morning. This item is a request to authorize the assessor to sign all open space subvention reports starting this year and into the future. As you may know, the government code provides for reimbursement to counties and cities who have Williamson Act contracts. Unfortunately, since 2009, when Governor Schwarzenegger was in office, those subventions went away. And although we are still required by law to submit the report, there is no financial outcome as a result of it. So this is a request to simply take it off of board action, move it to the assessor. It's a purely administrative act at this point. Anyway, my office produces the report. We send it into the state. It's not a subdivision of property.
Okay, thank you.
I see a light.
Thank you. Ms. Davis, just so I'm clear, board still does Williamson Act contracts. This is simply the report where we're reporting out on what we do.
Exactly. This is the report to the Department of Conservation.
Thank you.
So, bring it back to the board. Looking for a motion.
So moved.
A motion by Supervisor Mills. Do I have a second? I'm sorry, Supervisor Clapp. Excuse me. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Supervisor Garamendi. Call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to item number 8. Madam Clerk.
Item 8 is from the Office of Emergency Services to adopt a resolution authorizing the County Administrative Officer, Deputy County Administrative Officer, and the Director of Emergency Services to apply for funding in the amount of $134,112 for the fiscal year 2018-19 Emergency Management Performance Grant, and authorize the submittal of any applications or amendments thereto with the State of California for the purposes of securing the grant opportunity.
Supervisor Mills, you pulled this item.
Thank you, Chair. The only reason that I pulled it is because yesterday being a holiday, I was not able to email and get a question answered. But in the financing section of this, could staff provide the org key to which these funds would end up? And it also states that we will be a dollar for dollar match. So under what org key would the dollar for dollar match land within the OES budget?
Yes, so the org key that the funds are going into would be 1010-0470, and the actual line item would be 4529. That is part of what has been budgeted in that line for this fiscal year already that was approved by the board. The remainder does require, as you pointed out, a dollar for dollar match, which also has already been accounted for and budgeted and appropriated within the budget that was approved.
Within that same org key?
If it's a match, it wouldn't be in any org key. General fund would then fall out as basically the way that the budget is built. You have your total expenses, you offset any revenues that are received. That net that falls out would be that general fund match or contribution. So it wouldn't be accounted for in a line item.
Without digging into another budgetary issue, but would it not be a better move to, when there is a match requirement, to set that money aside within the confines of that budget unit? When you get the grant money, so that money is already appropriated in the budget unit.
You could, any way you look at it, typically what happens is that all of these federal and state grants have their own reimbursement form where you're showing what your expenses were on their own form. They don't even look at our budget. Our budget's just for our own internal use. So we already have to provide that reconciliation in a different form to demonstrate it. So certainly, we could, but you'd also run the issues where perhaps a department doesn't spend all of that grant, but you allocate all of your general fund to them. They got more general fund than they needed. Unless you were doing that monthly or consistent reconciliation, it might just add more to an administrative burden.
Well, my thought is, though, is that we would be able to see a direct view from our perspective on what that variance is, which we can't see right now. Mm-hmm. That's the purpose of the discussion.
And that's certainly something that if the board would like to see something like that, it would be changing kind of how we track quite a bit of funds within not just the general fund, but also some of our subvented programs like Health and Human Services, and what those impacts would be in setting those up within the chart of accounts.
I understand it's a separate policy discussion for a future date, but only to be thinking in terms of how do we see it when we see there's a grant. Do we have the matches set aside, or the 6.2575? Do we have those set asides already there within that budget unit and allocated or appropriated as needed? We're currently not able to see that, and I think that that's a little bit of a visual gap on our part, that we're not able to monitor that.
Perhaps you can have this discussion at midterm.
I would like to add that into the discussion. Thank you. With that, I'll move the item prior to public comment.
We open up for public comments. Any public comments in this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back. We have a motion by Supervisor Mills. Do we have a second for this item?
I'll second that.
Second by Supervisor Clapp. Call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0. Moving on, Madam Clerk, to item number 9.
Item 9 is from the Administrative Office to adjust the fiscal year 18-19 budget to cover refunds from the MCCR designated fund in the amount of $940,043. This budget adjustment requires a 4/5 vote of the board.
Supervisor Mills, you pulled this item.
Thank you, Chair. The reason that I pulled the item is that to, again, reinforce the need for a full accounting of costs prior to the payouts of any of these funds, that the board is then fully aware of what those costs are, that there's proper accounting, and I would like to see an independent accounting of those funds so that we can have a complete view of all of the costs associated with the urgency ordinance before the board would consider this matter on its merits. I've been asking for that full and complete accounting of costs associated with the urgency ordinance since January 2017, and to this date I have not seen that. I think it's very important for us to understand our role as supervisors, that when we start with the general principle that expenditures by an administrative official are proper only insofar as they are authorized by a legislative enactment, we can be held personally liable to repay improperly expended funds if we fail to exercise due care in permitting that expenditure. So I would want to be sure that we have exercised our due care as we move forward with any kind of decision regarding expending of funds, because these are public funds. These are not, they're not anything but public funds, and we want to be sure that we are doing our due diligence. So that is the reason to pull the item, and I will not be supporting it at this time.
Any other board comments? I will say this, simply moving these funds from one account to another account, which is a contingency account, to another account, does not mean that we are expending all of these funds. It's simply moving it from one account to another. It still certainly could have the audit that you're speaking of without expending any of these funds at this time until that audit is complete or we have the ability to do so. So it's simply moving it from one account to another is all that we're simply asked to be doing. That's all that's on the agenda. Nothing about where the money is going to go or spend it or so forth, which you are talking about. So I will open up public comment at this time. Any public comment on this item?
I've spoken with the auditor controller about this, and the numbers have all been calculated. My understanding is if you have a balanced budget, if so-called, I don't understand what going over this with a fine-tooth comb is going to accomplish, but I'm also all in favor of looking at the books, and any money spent after February 14th should probably be refunded because the program ended February 14th. So sure, let's open the books, but in the meantime, move the money and give the refunds that are appropriate. Thank you.
Greetings. I think I'd like to challenge Dennis on his points. You have your budget. It's all in the budget, right? You accounted for what you spent last year in last year's fiscal budget. That's 2016, 2017? It's all there. Now, as far as the study, the urgency ordinance required a nexus study, and you guys failed in that. You specifically failed in a provision of the urgency ordinance by not doing a nexus study within 1 year. As I recall, the urgency, I could be mistaken, but I believe it required a nexus study by the end of the first year of the program. This is not public money. This was money paid for a program. The program no longer exists. The money is left over. It belongs to the registrants. If you don't pay it out, Dennis, you become a thief, and you turn the whole county government into a big thief. You can't do that. You're going to get hit hard, and you will lose this one. You'll lose it big. You can't just willy-nilly keep money that belongs to other people and not expect something really, there'd be consequences. What are you guys going to do when you get hit with, what is it, 250, 300 small claim suits? You got someone to go in and sit in 300 small claim suits? The money belongs to the registrants. It's left over. It's documented. Staff has made it clear. I actually received a notice, and I filled out a form. This is pretty official looking to me. Actually, I filled out two, okay, as per the instructions. Now, to not move the money over would be an egregious violation of constitutional and state law. You don't want to create a little mini constitutional crisis here, Dennis. Not a good idea. Why don't you do the right thing, please? Save everybody a lot of trouble. Return the money to the people who are entitled to their own money.
Susan Morse. On September 14th, I came across an article in the pinetree.net concerning refunds to pot growers. I called the board clerk and asked for a copy of what appeared to be a press release. She mentioned she saw it in the newspaper too, but was not aware of the press release having been made, and she, like the article, referred me to CAO Lutz. I immediately made 2 and I think possibly 3 calls to CAO Lutz, left messages, but never received a return call. Since I reviewed my notes and found no mention of registrants being eligible for refunds, continuing my search for information on the point, I went to the Planning Department website and, among other things, found a 7-page instruction registration fee refund claim instructions. This was interesting because my notes did contain a copy of the registration's application form, which on the last page states, under penalty of perjury, the undersigned certifies that all information provided to this application and any documents, photographs, or identification materials required to be shown or provided in conjunction with this registration are complete, truthful, and accurate. By submitting this application, registrant understands and acknowledges that any fee for processing the application is non-refundable regardless of whether or not a registration or renewal is granted. This is on the last page of the grower's registration when they were registering to grow. These activities cause me great concern. When our local government officials are moving funds and planning to expend those funds without approval and public awareness, without an accounting, and then today attempting to address these activities within the consent agenda borders on abuse of public funds. I respectfully urge you, each of you, to provide us with a full explanation and an accounting of these actions prior to any further action being taken. Thank you.
Two years, 3 months, and 10 days have passed, and there's still no nexus study. The budget states that the MCCR account still has a positive $940,000 that, despite all efforts, has not been spent. Any rational person would be hard-pressed to try and defend not returning these surplus funds to the registrants that paid them to fund a temporary program and permanent regulation. The choice to enter false evidence and hijack the environmental review process to justify a head-in-the-sand policy was effective, but certainly does not give cause to further withhold reimbursement. Citing pending litigation is also no defense for not returning monies paid as a fee for the sole purpose of administering a county government program that no longer exists. Having chosen to reduce the sheriff's office budget so significantly during a self-imposed return to prohibition, it would seem just plain crazy to raid their coffers at a time like this when they have so much to do and they aren't even fully staffed. I believe the board's plan next week is to pay 4 department heads raises because the increased pay will help retain better qualified and more skilled workers. Surely the sheriff's office would benefit from the same idiom. All of these considerations leads one to wonder if the money is not returned, which seems likely because this action requires a 4/5 vote to pass, what could this money be spent on? The most logical conclusion would be the 26 extra hires that continue to receive an unfunded paycheck to administer a program that no longer exists. You continued to operate the urgency ordinance after adopting the ban and still couldn't spend all the money. Right or wrong? It must be stated again, the budget was a sham. There is no revenue to justify the continued payment of 26 full-time positions, yet they still have their jobs, at least until the election is over. You voted against your own budget, Dennis, which grew the government without paying for it, further increasing your reliance on the state that you loathe so much. If the past is any indicator of the future, it could reasonably be predicted that once public comment is over regarding this item, the nexus study will magically appear. We all know entering last-minute false information in the conversation is who you are. It's what you do. As a means to head off these predictable hijinks, it must be stated again, over $940,000 were unspent. The regulated farmers of Calaveras paid millions more in fees and taxes than any other industry and have kept this county out of bankruptcy. In turn, you have taken every opportunity to try and bankrupt every farmer. Do the right thing for once and authorize the repayment of these funds.
In many cases, the pot is still being grown. Perhaps not at the same location, but the same parties are doing it. And that needs to be sorted out. Thanks.
Vicki Reinke, Calaveras County. I want to thank you for pulling this item off of the consent agenda. Because I remember at the last budget meeting, this came up about this fund being transferred. And if I recall, the thing was that we were going to bring it forward to the next meeting so we could have a discussion so that we as a public could understand why this money is being refunded. You know, I've watched this process for the last, 3 years or what. And my understanding was that this money would not be refunded, and I too pulled the application that says that it will not be refunded and that they signed it knowing that would not be refunded. I'm not sure, do we refund developers who pay money for permitting and all and then don't build their projects? Is that something that we do as a county? Because this whole thing has always been very upsetting to most of us in this county. To return money now that they paid because they wanted to grow marijuana. They all grew it. They all got 2 years of growing before you guys banned it, which thank you for that. But anyway, so I think we do need an explanation, and I'm glad it got pulled so that we can have a discussion. I guess that was kind of it. Thank you.
Well, a couple of people have got up and cited the registration application, apparently failed to understand the language that they're reading, and if they'd like to talk to me afterwards, I'd be happy to go over it with them. And yeah, Prop 26 means you have to give back the unused portion. And Supervisor Mills, you're calling for a detailed accounting. It's already been pointed out that the Nexus study was supposed to be completed and published within a year, which it was not. And here we are quite a ways out, and the Nexus study exists, but hasn't been released. And also, if you're going to do a detailed accounting to determine whether or not it cost more than it generated, which apparently it did not, I would encourage you to also consider questions like, a lot of that money got spent on capital assets that are typically depreciated over time that are no longer being used to administer that program, like vehicles, for example, that the county is still using, that we paid for to administer oversight over the registrants in that program. I'd like to get to the bottom of that and find out whether that's legitimate or not. And I was kind of relieved that the county, Peter Maurer anyway, and I don't know who else, decided to do the right thing on their own without my having to sue them. I would really like to go on that way, where I fill out a form, they refund the amount due. Clearly, I paid $5,000 for a registration that the county claimed was valid for a period of 15 days, oddly, under the urgency ordinance, which could not survive legally past February 14th. Couldn't be. That's the nature of a UO. That's as long as it can exist. Your wind down period, in my opinion, and probably, well, we'll see who else's, because apparently folks on this board, some, would rather litigate than discuss. So I'll shut up for now. Thanks.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, we'll close public comments on this item. Supervisor Lutz, do you have any comments? Supervisor, excuse me, CAO Lutz, do you have any comments?
Yes, the item as presented includes the full transfer, and again, this would be within the same fund, the 5600 fund, which is the fund that all of the registration fees were deposited into. The request would be moving it from the contingency line, which is the 5990 line, up to the refund line 5612. The way that this was written was to include the entire fund balance of the of that 5600 fund. If the board wanted to direct otherwise, for instance, there are two elements to that. There's the renewal fees. Those are the growers that were passed in the program, grew for a year, were subsequently then required to submit, pay that annual renewal fee once that kicked in. That equates to about $130,000, $140,000. The remainder is funds that were from the original $5,000 application fees that had yet to be expended. The board could choose to move a portion of that to the refund line as opposed to what was recommended, which was the full amount.
Any other board comments or questions? Supervisor Garamendi.
Mr. Chair, I'm willing to make a motion that we adjust the fiscal year 18-19 budget to cover refunds from the NCCR designated fund in the amount of $940,043. $940,043 today.
Supervisor Oliveira.
I'll second the motion.
Any other board comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Before though, I do have a question. Your motion is to do what is being asked here and transfer it from a contingency fund to the payout refund line in order for the auditor to refund any refunds that we've authorized or will in the future authorize.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I have consensus we have heard consensus from County Council, County Auditor, CAO, our department heads that this is a full accounting of what we've spent versus what we've brought in. Therefore, I don't see any reason to go out until somebody brings me something that proves to me that we've done something wrong. I don't see any point paying for an outside audit. This is money that is not ours. The Nexus study, while people have brought that up, is interesting, but a Nexus study is that line going in the middle and prices and expenses go up and down. We have absolute numbers, and we have absolute numbers on expenses. We have absolute numbers on revenue. The delta deserves to be returned, so yes, just the way it reads.
Supervisor Olivera, your lights on, you have any comments?
No further comments.
Supervisor Mills, no?
No,
Okay.
I disagree.
I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Does not get the 4/5 vote. Moving on to item...
Mr. Chair, can I, there we go.
Could I make a motion?
Make a motion?
Yeah, I'd like
On
to
this
make,
item.
make a motion that we put take out of it for the last 5,000 fees that people paid just the last 15 days or something, that be taken out and dispersed to those people. But the rest,
You want to move the, I think the total of that amount is about $134,000.
134,000 I was told.
134,000, move that to the line item that's being
Yes.
requested for
And
this.
then have a complete study on the balance, so we can, because I had people from both sides saying about the depreciation of equipment and stuff, and that should be looked into. We should know what we're doing on that, and so I would make that motion.
So we have that motion. Do I have a second?
Mr. Chair, Supervisor Clapp, if you'll modify your motion to just stick to the $134,000 transfer without the 4/5 vote, without the audit, I'll second your motion.
No, I want the audit.
No? Do I have a second? Any second? No? Can I ask a question? The audit part of it is you won't go for an audit? Is there a reason?
I won't support an audit till somebody provides me evidence that why we should go spend $40,000 to $50,000 to have someone borrow our watch and tell us the time. I trust that the controller and county staff have done their job. Till somebody presents something otherwise, I don't see any reason to spend the money.
Supervisor Mills?
As contentious and controversial as this has been over the last 2 years of my tenure here nearly now, I don't think anything other than a outside independent accounting would be less than that's the only satisfactory way to really vet this and into the public's view and into our view, and give us all of the information that we really need to have to make a sound decision.
So would you second this motion that is made to the $134,000?
I will not support moving any funds without a complete outside accounting of our.
So we have no second for this motion. I will second that motion. Any further comments? We have a motion and a second. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, that dies. So moving on, item number 12. Madam Clerk.
Item 12 is from the Administrative Office to authorize the purchasing agent to advertise for bids or dispense with formal competitive bidding in accordance with Government Code Section 25502.7 and execute purchase orders or contracts in amounts up to $250,000 in accordance with FEMA, Cal OES, and local procurement guidelines, or up to whatever amounts are budgeted within various disaster budgets for the acquisition of goods, supplies, equipment rentals, and services necessary for expedited completion of projects associated with Butte Fire and Winter Storm Emergency Disaster Events declarations.
Bonnie?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Bonnie Rich, Administration. This item comes to the board with a request to delegate authority to the purchasing agent, the ability to award contracts or purchase orders for services and supplies associated with disaster events up to $250,000. The county code 3.28 and pursuant to government code, delegates authority to the purchasing agent, signature authority up to $50,000 for services and supplies. So generally, anything over that amount has to come back to the board for award or approval. Government code specifically states that in populations of less than 200,000, the board, if the board appoints or employs a purchasing agent, that authority to enter into contracts or award bids or issue purchase orders is limited to that amount set forth in government code, which is $50,000 plus an annual CPI. Our ordinance is strictly limited to $50,000. In the event of an emergency, typically when either the government or the president declares an emergency or the county board of supervisors declares an emergency, typically this increased delegation of authority is included in those emergency declarations. This is coming to you a little after the fact. I think one of the questions that Supervisor Mills has is whether or not the board can, under this emergency situation, delegate authority beyond what government code says the purchasing agent can have. And my understanding is, yes, that can happen. I've worked with counsel on this matter. Otherwise, under an emergency situation, the purchasing agent would simply just be limited to $50,000 to award any services and supplies for purchases under this emergency declaration or any of these emergency declarations. This does not include construction work. Public contract code covers that separately. There's this whole separate requirement to bring an item to the board to authorize the purchasing agent to award construction contracts. We may be bringing an item back to this board for construction contracts separately, but that's my understanding that the government code does allow the Board of Supervisors to delegate that authority to the purchasing agent. We've had several projects over the summer that the Director of OES has worked with Public Works to complete. That included the need to rent heavy equipment. We needed to purchase road materials. This authority, which is similar authority that was delegated to the purchasing agent under the tree mortality program. This is a similar request. This allows us to continue to purchase materials and supplies without having to come back to the board for that specific approval or award of a bid or execution of a purchase order or a contract. I will note that it is the intent that the Director of OES would include any detailed information regarding any acquisitions in her monthly report to the board.
Supervisor Mills?
Thank you, Bonnie, and Chair. 25502.3 is what you're referencing to in populations of under 200,000 with that $50,000 limit in the CPI. On point 7, it says within the amounts the Board of Supervisors may establish. That's kind of in my world is we're having the authority to make these decisions. That's a lot of money or a lot of blanket purchase order capability here in one person's hands. And even when you go to point 5, 502.5, in counties population of 200,000 or more, not to exceed 100,000. So there was something with legislative intent here that leads me to think that they wanted to have some kind of limitations on what boards would suggest as a number.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's my concern, and that's the reason for pulling it, is that when we give somebody a blanket purchase order for $250,000, yes, you do explain to some degree within the confines of the agenda item what that's going to be used for. But that's a big number. It's
I agree
really a
with
big
you,
number.
and I hear what you're saying. I think your underlying concern is can the board even delegate to the purchasing agent authority in excess of what is established in government code? And that's an excellent question. And I believe for the provisions of emergency situations that the board can. And I absolutely concur with you, and it seems a little, why would they tie purchasing agent signature authorities to population? Well, it's based on supply and demand and the things that government typically has to procure for its departments, who in turn provide those services to the public. So there is definitely an intent and a rationale there, but in an emergency situation, I believe that puts us in a different bucket, if you will. I would not feel comfortable, and nor could you legally delegate that authority to the purchasing agent outside of this emergency situation. You absolutely can't. Government code is very, very clear about that. Our population is around 45,000. We'll likely never have the ability to have that increased delegated authority. We can certainly reduce that amount. If the board is not comfortable with that amount, we can reduce that amount. But the intent is when the road crew or contractors are out there doing the repairs and doing the work that needs to be done to our transportation infrastructures or facility infrastructures, that we're able to keep the projects going. Hence, the intent of reporting back to the board every month what it is that we are doing, so that, there is no surprise to the board. Within this particular agenda item, we do have outstanding invoices for road materials to George Reed, one of our road material suppliers, producers, and for work that was done over the summer. We need to be able to pay George Reed for those materials. Again, it's necessary, and it helps expedite the repairs that need to be done, but certainly that is, within the discretion of the board, unless council has anything to add to that.
I unfortunately was not the counsel who worked on this item. I just texted Mr. Whalen from our office. I'm not sure if he's listening. So I didn't research it. I do see you've cited directly to the government code. I haven't looked at any annotated cases under there. I don't know whether or not he has. It appears that our office, in signing off this item, felt confident that that in an emergency situation, the delegation could be higher. So I don't have anything else to add at this point.
My thought is not to limit staff's ability to undertake these contracts, but to try to limit the amount to within what would be considered a normal turnaround time in a billing cycle. And that if we're out there with $250,000 sitting there, but we're only going to turn around 100,000, or we're going to turn around 150,000, why are we going after $250,000? So that's the part of it that I'm uncomfortable with, is trying to be sure that we're not authorizing way beyond what would be considered a normal cycle in billing.
And I want to ensure the board that this agenda item doesn't just give the purchasing agent blanket authority to go out and purchase without following any sort of competitive selection process whatsoever. The challenge is if the road crew is in the middle of a project and they have a road tore up, or they're in the middle of repairing that road, we have a 3-week lead time to get an agenda item, scheduled for this board to consider. We would likely, because FEMA and Cal OES require it, still have to engage in formal competitive selection processes. We would have to go out and get quotes at a minimum. So it's not just like a blank check for $250,000. And we don't know. That number is really a guesstimate. Again, we have a little over 122,000 in road materials just from projects alone this summer. We had an agenda item that we brought to this board where we rented heavy equipment because we did not have equipment on hand to do the work. That was almost $100,000. So when we're talking about heavy equipment rentals and road materials, those are pricey items just by the nature of the commodities. And a lot of road materials are petroleum-based. When gas goes up, the cost of those products go up.
I'm simply saying, we look at the list of the events that are in this agenda item. That's 121,000 something. Beyond that, the staff is asking for well over $100,000 more beyond that, and we're at the end of the construction cycle.
Correct.
Right now,
We're not going to be doing a lot of ground disturbing work right now. Supervisor Mills, if I can make a suggestion that we ratify the George Reed purchases and maybe reduce it to $100,000 with that.
I would be way more comfortable with that.
Okay.
Way more comfortable.
And, you know, we had conversations on this same issue. I was in last Friday with my concerns on this, and there's no indication of an aggregate sum here,
right,
where 100,000 for this for asphalt over here, and then Carson Hill 150,000 over there, and so we're above the 250,000 because we're piecemealing things together, and there's no anything in here that specifically states that we will be getting an accounting of the expended funds. We haven't actually, we've had OES reports on these issues, but we still have no report monthly of expended funds during that month to where we're at. How is this going to change that? So I would feel like we had the statement the other day in your office that I would feel more comfortable at this point at $100,000 and going ahead and approving the $121,000 for George Reed. And then as we go forward, we can always make adjustments. Certainly there are some, you spoke of Cal OES and FEMA and accounting for them in the expenditures and having to go out and get qualified bids. It's absolute emergencies, they waive some of those things. In other words, get it done quickly because of the danger to the public and so forth. So there are instances where you don't have to actually go out and get competitive bids. And in the cases that you do, it seems like we're being, the way it's being presented, that the possibility that it could not even be brought to the board. When you go out for competitive bids, there is a time frame. You're going out, so it wouldn't need to be immediately. It's not an emergency, although it may be emergency work, such as 3 years after Butte Fire or 2 years after winter storm damage and so forth. So those were the concerns that we had spoke about, and I still have those same concerns along those lines. So I would be in favor of the $100,000 limit at this point. And maybe as we go along and we're getting reports and things look fine, that we can up the ante at that point.
And Chair, if you don't mind, I would like to make a motion to that if we get through public comment. We still have to do public comment on it as well. But I would support, again, that's double what is listed on the code. So 100,000 is being the number, and if you need to come back, as long as we have an accounting for what we're doing, and again, the timelines and the cycles, billing cycle. The billing cycle is the critical part. So understanding what that is and then having another discussion if necessary would, to me, make more sense. But to approve the $121,177 to George Reed today, I have no problem with that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I'd like to hear from Mr. Boyer on this issue. Mr. Boyer? Thank you for coming over, Mr. Boyer. Mr. Boyer, in Public Works, in emergency situations, how many projects do we have that would exceed $250,000 that were done by our personnel?
Now, are you talking about known projects related to the Butte Fire and
Are known projects or budgeted and monies allocated to those projects? Are we talking emergency or established projects?
So if we're talking about projects pursuant to the Butte fires and the winter storms that have already occurred, I think that $250,000 would be above that upper limit and provide staff the resources necessary to react quickly.
Okay, and we've elected to do that work ourselves instead of contracting it out, correct?
The FEMA projects we are allowed to do with our own crews if we're comfortable with the nature of the work and that we've got the qualifications to do it. And that was the case with the 100 or so projects that we completed this summer. The 5 remaining projects were likely to go out to competitive bid for contractors to build those, so it requires a little bit of specialized expertise.
And for the presentation of Bonnie, these funds cover not construction costs, but materials costs?
Correct. My understanding is it covers materials, services, sort of everything up to the point of construction.
Okay. I would agree with Supervisor Tofinelli that the $100,000 limit might be a favorable limit. And then we can adjust if we have to have another look at this issue.
Any other board comments? If not, we'll open for public comments in this item.
Taxpayer Association, Alsacala, you guys are doing good work. We agree. 100,000 makes sense.
Other public comments? If not, we'll close public comments, bring it back for a motion.
My motion would be to pay the George Reed of $121,777 and to then provide $100,000 as the threshold for this particular action today.
Do I have a second?
I'll second, Mr. Chair.
I have a second. I have a motion by Supervisor Mills, second by Supervisor Oliveira. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0. We made 12 o'clock. We're going to stand adjourned till
Excuse me.
Mr. Chair, point of order.
Yes.
Passes 4-0.
It's 5-0.
5-0.
You said 4.
You said 4.
I'm sorry. 5-0. Now, we will stand adjourned until 2 o'clock for the High Social. All right, we are back from lunch, and we will continue on the regular agenda. Madam Clerk, item number 17.
Item 17 is from the Public Works Department to authorize the Board Chair and Deputy Director of Public Works to execute a cooperative agreement with Caltrans to provide quality assurance and oversight services for the development of the plans, specifications, and estimate for the State Route 4 Wagon Trail Realignment Project.
Mr. Boyer, is this your item?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, so this is a very routine item. As you know, the Wagon Trail project is funded through COG with funds called State Transportation Improvement Program, or what we call STIP dollars. Caltrans rules and procedures require that if a local agency takes responsibility for delivering the plans and other bid documents, environmental permits, anything like that, on Caltrans' behalf, they have a reviewing role. The cooperative agreement defines what the county does and what Caltrans will do as the reviewer. So it's a very routine item that just defines roles and responsibilities. We will be back to you in the next 3 months or so. Originally, when that was negotiated, Caltrans wanted to be responsible for doing the land appraisals and acquisitions. That was not something that I thought was in the county's best interest for a variety of reasons. I think we will ultimately be able to obtain land rights quicker and more cost effectively if we acquire the appraisals and acquisitions ourselves. We need to hire the firm to do that work. Once we do that, we'll amend the cooperative agreement to deal with those land rights issues. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any board questions on this item? No? Open up for public comment. Is there any public comments on this item? Seeing none, bring it back to the board and look for a motion.
So moved, Mitch. Go ahead.
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion by Supervisor Mills, a second by Supervisor Oliveira.
Thanks.
Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you, Matt. Moving on to item number 18.
Item 18 is from the Sheriff's Office to authorize the Board Chair to sign the First Amendment Agreement with Amador County for the confinement of inmates at the Calaveras County Jail for a period of 1 year at a daily rate of $85 per day. Maximum potential revenue is $186,150,000 per year.
All right. Chris Hewitt, Lieutenant with the Sheriff's Office, and if you haven't heard, I'm now the new jail commander. So it took one of me to replace two of them, so I'm the lone commander in there. Anyway,
And that was a captain and lieutenant.
Anyway, so back to this. As you may know, July of last year, Amador County entered into a contract with us to supply 6 jail beds for housing services due to their inability to house a large number of inmates. With that, there's an 85-day per inmate cost. When we started this last year, we budgeted for the fiscal year 17-18 and also for this fiscal year 18-19, we budgeted a $60,000 revenue. When in fact, last year's fiscal year 17-18, we actually saw a revenue of $92,735. So as of this year, as of July of this year, we've already seen $6,715 revenue from July till October. This has been a beneficial partnership between both agencies and both counties. We receive the revenue from it, and then they're able to free up some bed space in their own jail by transferring their inmates over to us to look out after them. So with this, this is just going to be a 1-year extension, and from what I understand is we're going to reevaluate the cost after this 1 year to see if we need to increase the cost or not. So with that said, the Sheriff's Office recommends that we do extend this contract by 1 year until we can reevaluate it at the end of this period.
Any board comments?
Mr. Chair, I have a comment. Actually, a question. Lieutenant, thank you for coming over. How many beds do we have in our jail?
We have 160.
And we are filling how much of those beds with this contract?
6 beds. They're allotted 6 beds. And we try to keep our population below 100 inmates, because once we hit that mark, we have to provide 24 hours medical service through CFMG.
So with our in-custody listings, we're at what number below 100?
We're averaging about 76 male inmates, and I believe it was about 25 female inmates per day.
So we actually have no more room for those standards for another agency to use our facilities, correct?
Not at this time, no, sir.
Okay. Do we look in the future that that might be a possibility?
There is talk about offering it up to other counties in the future, but at this time, because of the increased cost for medical care and having medical personnel on site 24/7, this is something we're going to look at, but not at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Lieutenant.
Supervisor Mills, your light's on.
Lieutenant, what's your break-even cost right now per bed?
Break-even cost per day. This figure was developed by Maria Hensey prior to her leaving, but our cost right now per day for our inmates is roughly $114 a day. So we're a little short in our revenue based on we charge Amador $85 a day, but we developed this cost based on recommendations and studies done by the DOJ U.S. Marshal Service. So.
Now, does this include a reciprocity agreement that if you need beds, they'll...
There is 1 bed, yes, sir. So there are 7 beds. We offer 6 beds, but there's a 7th bed for free. Should we need to just suddenly call them and say, hey, we need to house one of our inmates with you, there's no cost to us.
Great. Thank you.
Any public comments on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I so move.
Motion by Supervisor Oliveira.
I'll second it.
Second by Supervisor Clapp. Call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you. All right.
Madam Clerk, we're moving on to item number 19.
Item 19 is from the assessor to approve the Calaveras County 457 Deferred Compensation Plan Statement of Investment Policies and Guidelines.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Leslie Davis, Chair of the county's Deferred Compensation Plan Administrative Committee. A committee was created by board action in June of 2014. The board charged the committee with administering the plan and developing bylaws and an investment policy to bring back for board approval. The committee brought the bylaws back for board approval 2 years ago. In May, we approved the investment policy. We've been working on this policy for most of the last 4 years, having reviewed investment policies in other jurisdictions, and also working with our consultants to develop a policy that would have us acting in the best interest of the plan participants. We are recommending this statement of investment policies and guidelines to your board for approval.
Any board comments, questions? Seeing none. Any public comments, questions? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
So moved.
A motion by Supervisor Mills,
Second.
second by Supervisor Clapp. Call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to item number 20, Madam Clerk, I believe this is your item.
It is. So from the Clerk of the Board of Supervisors, the introduction and waive reading of an ordinance reorganizing the Calaveras County Fish and Game Commission membership as recommended by the Clerk of the Board and the Fish and Game Commission, and to receive the Commission's 2018 annual report. So as directed by the board earlier this year, I've been doing a review of each of the 34 committees, commissions, and boards, and trying to identify areas in which we can help them to be more successful, whether it's do they need to adjust their membership, or do they need some help with the Brown Act and posting their agendas, that kind of thing. What we have found with the Fish and Game Commission is that the Fish and Game Commission is made up of 10 members, 2 from each supervisorial district. This group oftentimes struggles to have a quorum. They have been running at about, usually 4 can show up, and they need a quorum of 6 to have a meeting. And they only meet between January and October of each year. After discussions with the commission decided and is supportive of recommending a change to the Board of Supervisors, which would reduce their number of members from 10 to 7. And that 7 would be made up of 1 representative from each supervisorial district and 2 members at large from anywhere in the county. We're also suggesting that because they are currently set for 1-year terms, so every year all the terms expire at once. So we are suggesting that we extend the terms to 2 years and that we stagger them accordingly so that they're not all expiring at once. I believe that the way we have it written is that districts 1, 3, and 5 would expire in the odd number years, and districts 2, 4, and the 2 members at large would expire in even numbered years. Because all of their terms of the current members are currently expiring on December 31st of this year, and they were formed by ordinance, we're recommending that we introduce and waive reading of this change today and then bring it back at a subsequent meeting so that when we advertise for these positions in the coming month, that we will be able to advertise for the new slated or new proposed membership. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So are you proposing to start this out that the 1, 4, and the 2 at large only start their term for 1 year and expires at the end of 2019, and then
Yes.
1, 3, and 5 go 2 years?
Yes, the
Okay.
even number, the odd numbers would be for 1 year again. The even numbers would be for 2 years, and then the next December, we would catch up the odd number years to 2-year terms.
Just want to clarify.
Yes.
Supervisor Garamendi?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you, Madam Clerk, for all your work on this. I've served on this commission before I was on the Board of Supervisors, and I've been liaison for the last 2 years. These are needed changes, and I highly endorse us moving ahead with them.
Thank you.
Any other board comments? If not, we'll open for public. Any public comments on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back for a motion.
So moved.
I have a motion by Supervisor Clapp.
Second.
Second by Supervisor Garamendi. Call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Moving on to item number 21.
Item 21 is also from the Clerk of the Board of Supervisors, the appointment of applicants to serve on various committees, commissions, advisory boards, and county service areas. Today, we have 2 vacancies and 2 applications before you. The first is for a position on the Air Pollution Control Hearing Board. It's for a vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/20 for an engineer, and we have an application from Jim Heminger. The second is for the Parks and Recreation Commission. We have 1 vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/19 for a District 2 representative, and we have an application from Zero McDaniel.
Okay, so I guess we should handle this first. Does anybody have any objections to either of the applicants for these boards?
How many Parks and Rec commissioners do we currently have appointed?
We have 1,
Kevin.
and we have 1 representative from CCWD.
So this still won't give them a quorum, but
No.
So if we don't have any opposition for the applicants on either one of these, I guess we can take a motion to include all of them at once and go from there.
so moved.
So a motion by Supervisor Mills. We have a second.
Second.
A second by Supervisor Garamendi. Is there any public comments on this item? Seeing none, we'll be back. Call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to supervisors' announcements. Madam Clerk.
In compliance with AB 1234, Chapter does Government Code Section 53232.3D, board members shall provide brief reports on meetings they attended at the expense of the local agency at the next regular meeting of the legislative body. This report is required to include meetings attended for which there have been expense reimbursement, such as mileage, meals, lodging, etc., but may also, at the board member's discretion, include any other meeting attended by the supervisor on behalf of the county.
We'll start with Supervisor Clapp.
I have nothing to report out.
Okay, we'll go on to Supervisor Garamendi.
I have nothing to report out, especially since we have no budget, so can't get reimbursed for this. But I have nothing to report this time, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Oliveira.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On October 2nd, I attended the U.S. Forest Service meeting in Sonora regarding the over-the-snow vehicle program and the Forest Service. This was the second of 2 public meetings. The meeting was attended by interested parties in the Stanislaus Forest area in Tuolumne County, Alpine County, Calaveras County. Representation from Congressman McClintock's office was there, along with other political groups, other politician groups. Well attended, well messaged information. There is going to be a decision on this. It's a very high focused issue right now for our winter recreation. I must admit, in my district, in District 4, it's extremely important because of the increased wintertime visitors and the commerce along the Highway 4 corridor. Personally, I am in favor of not restricting any further lands, but also make known that the recreational ability of our forests are for everyone, skiers, snowmobilers, and we must have an equal balance of both. I did attend the East Bay Mud Party Barbecue on Friday, as well as some of our representatives here. That annual event, very informative, see what East Bay Mud is up to, and they've done a fine job. That's all I have to report.
Supervisor Mills.
Yeah, we had a guest appearance in Vallecito a couple days ago. Governor Brown showed up and spent time with some of our local residents. And also attending the Pardee Barbecue, I had a chance to have a very long conversation with Steve Moore, who's one of the 5 members of the State Water Board. And rather interesting how he is looking at water and water banking and unimpaired flows. So it was just a real good, honest conversation, and I appreciated his time to be able to hear the local perspective. So that's all I have.
And I have nothing to report out that costs money to the county. So we'll go to the CAO. Lutz, you have nothing. County Council, nothing to report. Madam Clerk.
I do. So just as I briefly mentioned during the item for the appointment of applicants, I just wanted to give you a heads up that in the coming weeks you will be receiving a list from me of the positions on the citizen boards, committees, and commissions that will have terms expiring at the end of this calendar year. And so my hope is that you will be able to drum up some applicants for us and drum them up. And applications can be obtained from my office. They can be obtained from you, as I will provide them to you. And they can also be obtained on their website.
Thank you. And with that, anything else? No? We stand adjourned.